Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly deep dive into the world of college admissions.
Hi, I'm Susan, and I'm a college counselor and have read applications for a small liberal arts college and 2 research universities. My twins are recent college graduates.
I'm Lisa, and I'm a clinical psychologist and college counselor. I have a daughter in college, a daughter in high school, and a son in middle school. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of 2 daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a wellness coach at the Keenan Flagler Business School at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And I'm so blessed to be able to work alongside both my beautiful daughters at School Match for You, a college counseling firm that I founded in 2010. Good afternoon, friends. And if you think I sound a little different, well, I had 2 teeth extracted 6 hours ago, so I'm trying to power through it here. And friends, you're going to notice a slightly different format for the next 3 weeks. Normally, we have our In the News, and then our question from a listener, our interview, and our college spotlight. But I checked out SpeakPipe the other day, and I was like, snap. How did that happen? We went from 187 messages, almost all questions, but some are messages, that had been left to 204. So for the next 3 weeks, instead of having it in the news, we're going to do 2 QFLs, question from a listener, just to help us get caught up, and then we'll resume our normal format. This week, for our first question, Lisa and I answer a question from a listener about how much weight should a student put on admitted student visit day when they're trying to make a final decision. That'll be with Lisa. And the second question is with Susan. And we get the first question anybody's ever sent in on Project Lead the Way courses. What are Project Lead the Way courses and how do admission officers perceive them? We've got a brand new interview and Lisa is back. It'll be with Michelle McAnaney. And the topic is how to maximize the college visit. And it'll be a 2-parter. And for our college spotlight, it's the final part of Kevin Newton breaking down the London School of Economics.
And now it's time for a question from one of our listeners.
Lisa, another great question. We love our regular listeners. Thank you, Alex, for being in our listening family. Let's pay the question and share your thoughts, Lisa.
Hi, Mark and team. My name is Alex. I'm a regular listener, and I'm calling in to ask about how much weight parents and students should give admitted students days when thinking about the choice of where to go for college. A lot of my parent friends have been talking about really big differences they've noticed between admitted students' days or weekends at various colleges. Differences in the level of organization, of customization, and this is not just by selectivity. Some very selective institutions I've been hearing had weekends that were less than impressive, while other schools really go all out, it seems, to personalize and cater to the student. I'm just wondering, in your and your team's experience and expertise, how representative is it, the admitted students events, of the kind of experience the student would actually have enrolling at that school? And how do you help students and families think about how much weight to give these types of events when making a college choice? Thank you so much.
Where do you want to start with this one?
Well, I thought this is such an interesting question and something I've been hearing a lot about from clients or even just, people that I know about admitted student days and how they can either make or break a student's vision of that school. And so I think that, the question of like, are they actually like a barometer that you can use to judge what the school is actually like? I mean, I would probably say yes and no. you know, yes, in the sense that it takes a lot of organization to pull off a good admitted students day or weekend. And if the school has like pretty good like administration or they're, then it might be easier for them to do that at a school where it's a little bit more decentralized or disorganized or their funding issues, you know. And so like that being said, I mean, I heard a admitted student day or weekend review from Georgetown that was absolutely just very negative and in great detail, and I think it really turned that student off, so much so that they decided not to go there. Whether that was fair to Georgetown or not, I don't know, but I think Georgetown, at least for the student, did not put their best foot forward. um, and so that's just really interesting to me. I've also, heard that, you know, some admitted students days, like will just turn a kid, like they're so well run, they're so engaging. They can take a kid who maybe thought this was their second or third choice and, yield them. And that also may or may not be indicative of what their life is going to be like at that school.
Yeah, I agree. This is another complicated one. By the way, whatever Virginia Tech did, they had the
Oh, I've heard terrible things about them. I'm sorry.
I heard good things about their admitted student visit program. Like I had two students where they were not even one, they weren't even on the radar, and one they weren't in the top three, and they had a really good admitted student visit program this year. So anyway, back to the question. I am a big believer in trusting your instincts when you're on a campus. And I'm even more of a big believer in that when you can spend a lot of time on a campus because you just start watching, observing, and picking up a vibe. And admitted student visit days, it breaks my heart when my students don't attend them because I really find them to be very valuable. So in general, I really lean toward putting a lot of emphasis on them. If I was forced to have to pick between a lot of emphasis or no emphasis, I would definitely say a lot of emphasis. You know, when Susan and I were having our conversation that you were a part of when we did that 3-part discussion on how to pick a college, we talked about how important it is to go back once you've been admitted. And it's important for a few reasons. One, these programs tend to be very comprehensive, very thorough, especially if you didn't do an open house program. If you did more of a traditional day visit or self-guided tour, they're going to blow that away with the knowledge you're going to get. But also, you're in a different state of mind, especially if it's a school that was either like reach or stretch or challenge school for you, or even a possible or a target. In other words, if it was a school that when you were visiting, you kind of know, like, I may not get in here. What tends to happen for people when they visit those schools, it's not unlike asking a hot girl to go on the prom. Like you kind of sort of put your defense mechanisms up, knowing, okay, I may not get the answer I want here, so I'm going to sort of emotionally prepare myself. So if I don't get the right answer, I'm not in a catatonic, corner, fetal position, calling Lisa for help. So like you kind of like brace yourself, and you don't really allow yourself to completely imbibe the place. It's just a natural defense mechanism that we kind of all do, And I used, the prom. I could have said go for a job that has like you're interviewing at Google or something. There's a lot of different illustrations I could use. So once you're in, your guard is dropped. And there's an aspect of that where your eyes are open and you just see things and you hear things. And I do find it helpful for people to go to more than one so they can compare. One of my best debriefs I did this year was from a Wisconsin student. They visited heavily, a lot of schools in the process, comp sci student. And their final 4 schools came down to the in-state, UW-Madison, CU Boulder, Pittsburgh, and WPI. And they ended up picking, CU Boulder, which is comp sci's in their engineering department. And they were guaranteed a spot in there, but they got into the feedback on the engineering and that program. And just hearing the details of Pitt's visit versus WPI's versus UW-Madison, and the level of detail which they communicated how they got a feel for it. And those were second visits for them. So I tend to definitely lean in the camp of putting a big emphasis on it. Now, there's caveats. There's an aspect of anytime you're on a school for 4 to 6 hours, 8 hours, some of them are even 2 days. The school, you see it in its naturalness, and they can't fabricate everything. Everything can't be totally contrived. But there is another aspect when they're marketing.
Yes.
Like I used to be a part of planning these. And we did a lot of things differently. Like the food was not the normal food. The cleaning crew came in, the grounds crew came in, you had the special music, you did all that stuff. And you souped up your game, you stepped up your game. So there is an aspect where some people just choose within their priorities to put more resources that they allocate toward this. And that can have somewhat of an impression. So I don't want to make it sound like there's not an aspect to that too. Now, some people might say, well, what does it say if somebody's putting a tremendous amount of resources into this versus not? It could be interpreted 2 ways, right? It could be they value you so much as a person and that you're really, really important, and they're going to go all out to show you how important you are. Or it could be similar to the essay that is so massaged over by the editor that it doesn't even look like the student anymore. And I certainly would definitely say that as important as admitted student visits are, and I really am a huge fan of them, it should also be done in conjunction with all the other things.
Right. It's like one data point, but
correct.
You have to look at the whole set of information.
Yeah. Like one thing that I've been having all my students do, and it's been really helpful, is just to take, whatever their major is. Let's just say it's economics. And let's say they're down to 3 schools. And then I have them go to the department page and to compare every single thing about the department page, differences in curriculum. And then I have them look up all the faculty in the department. I have them go to Rate My Professors and read the reviews of every teacher that they'll be under, and read the course descriptions. That's important, right? So, someone said to me the other day in a counseling session, they're like, well, what's the most important thing when you're trying to pick a school? And I said, they wanted to know more like one resource kind of thing. I said, I can't answer that, because are your biggest questions about the academic program? That's a whole set of different things you want to look at. Is it about career outcomes? That's a whole different thing. Is it about type of student I'm around? That's about it. Is it like student body life? Like there's all these different things, and different people are going to have different concerns or priorities, right? Someone might really want to know what your student life is like, and that's going to be incredibly important to them, in their student experience. Where somebody else wants to know about their food allergy and how they can accommodate it, and someone else wants to know how their study abroad programs work. Like, it's so different, but I find it tends to break down to those kinds of categories of like academic program, career outcomes, type of kid that's at the school, and student life experience. I think that's pretty comprehensive. There's other things as well, but I'd probably put them in one of those buckets like safety and the reputation of the college, although some people might see that as being subsumed under academics. Even things like if people want to know, you're 90 minutes from an airport, how do we get there? And so you want to find out okay, are you running shuttles, or how often, like that? I still would sort of put that into the student experience. So it does depend on what are the biggest determinants for people in making these decisions. But I always say the thing about visits that make them so important is visits are the one time when you get feel.
Mm-hmm.
And you can get a lot of stuff from the internet, but it's hard to fully get feel. And you get a better feel if you're on a school a lot longer because you're hearing more speakers and you're meeting more different students, and all of those things are forming an impression. Like when you were sharing your story about Georgetown, the first thought that popped into my mind, Lisa, was Georgetown probably just wasn't the school for them. Somebody else could have attended that exact same event and absolutely loved Georgetown.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah.
In fact, I'm thinking of somebody who went to Georgetown, admitted student. I don't know if it was this exact same one. And it's like just absolutely their number one after that visit. So any other thoughts for Alex?
I think we kind of answered it, I guess it's our usual one. It depends, right?
Yeah, I don't know if we helped or we made it more confusing, Alex, but just throw in our 2 cents for what it's worth. Susan's back. Hi, Susan.
Hey, Mark.
And we've got a question, another one tailor-made for her. I'm going to play the question. And this is the first time we've talked about Project Lead the Way. So, Susan, take it where you want to go.
Hi, Mark, and to the rest of the Your College Bound Kid team. I'm a longtime listener and really enjoy the podcast and all the information that you guys give out with Straight Talk. It's really a phenomenal tool, and appreciate everything that you do. I wanted to see if you had any opinions, though, on the value of PLTW. That's Project Lead the Way classes and their value in admissions. My son is a very strong student. He's a junior in taking STEM related classes primarily, and he wants to study biomedical engineering in college. He's taken or scheduled to take pretty much every STEM AP he can, from all the sciences as well as through Calc, A, B, and BC. But he's also taken 5 of these PLTW classes, and he's really enjoyed them and their relevance to what he wants to study. The classes he's taken are such as Intro to Engineering, Digital Electronics, Principles of Biomedical Science, Human Body Systems, and Medical Interventions. The Medical Interventions class even has a potential to get a certification to be able to work in wet labs, and they're doing some pretty advanced work in terms of working on different types of medical scenarios. I just haven't heard much discussion on PLTW from podcasts or from different college admissions folks, and I was just curious as to what your opinions are on them, especially in combination with taking APs and how that might impact a college application, especially for selective schools. And I just didn't know if they were considered very valued or not really valued much at all. I just hadn't heard much discussion on them. And I really appreciate any thoughts or opinions that you may have. Thank you so much. And once again, really appreciate all that you guys do.
Well, let me just start off by saying I am a fan.
You like creative pedagogy outside of the AP curriculum, and
I do.
Engagement. Yeah.
And Project Lead the Way is something that I was not familiar with until I started reading applications starting about 6 years ago for a university that was kind of STEM heavy, not exclusively STEM, but STEM heavy, everything from, engineering to medicine to computer science to, you name it. And I started reading applications that, transcripts were full of Project Lead the Way coursework. So I started studying up on it a little bit, and because I was curious as to what it represented and also what it replaced in a curriculum and how it was legitimized. What did it mean? I was used to AP, IB, dual enrollment at community college, and the Cambridge exam system, and so here was suddenly PLTW. Now, from my experience, it's a curriculum a membership curriculum that mostly public high schools engage with to create a robust series of courses and learning experiences in STEM. So that's, in a nutshell, what it is. So a high school pays to be a member organization, and what they get is literally a pre-K through 12 curriculum. Now, I have no idea how many schools use the lower school and middle school pieces of the curriculum. I was only seeing high school transcripts, but I was amazed to look at the Project Lead the Way website and see what they're doing, beginning with literally kindergarten children, to start building STEM awareness. STEM is fun. STEM isn't just for really left brain boys. It's for everybody, and it's creative. It's design oriented, and it's also technical. But I was really impressed with that. So high schools decide, I think, how they want to have Project Lead the Way in their high school curriculum. It sounds like from our listener that his son is in it whole hog, which is
But
exciting.
he's also done the AP as well. He's done both.
Yes. And I was interested in that some AP classes are actually formatted through Project Lead the Way. And I think they're mostly at the algebra level, maybe not at the calculus level. But Project Lead the Way has algebra 1 and maybe, I don't remember, algebra 2 or geometry in there as well, where the curriculum is coordinated with the science curriculum. So really, really interdisciplinary and foundational, exciting. Now, our question was focused somewhat on, so colleges, what do you think about this? Is this worth its, is it worth its salt? Do people have any idea? Do they think it's just like Boy Scouts or
Right.
what?
How are they perceived? How does it land? How are they perceived? Yes.
Well, my take on this is that it has been highly, highly admired for leveling the playing field across particularly public schools and providing curriculum and opportunities very inexpensively. And I should have said that earlier, that a school's membership to Project Lead the Way is peanuts. I mean, I think it's like $5,000 or $6,000 and a year, I'm assuming. And then they pay another couple $1,000s a year for teacher training, for professional development for their teachers. Right.
And if people don't think that's peanuts, you should see like what IB charges.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so much.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's tens of thousands of dollars a year. Right. And you have to become a school for, all that stuff. But it's a way for schools that are less well-resourced to bring a really robust STEM curriculum into their school and teach teachers how to work with kids. So our caller mentioned, that his son probably started with Intro to Engineering, moved on to digital electronics, principles of biomedical science, human body systems, and medical interventions. Sometimes as an application reader, I see all of those throughout high school, sometimes 2 courses a year. And sometimes I only see 1 or 2. And I will say that Project Lead the Way, for me, has greater impact when the student has taken more of them. Right. But I also get it when a student might take Intro to Engineering and digital electronics and say, okay, I'm going to take regular old physics or AP physics and chemistry, and I'm more of a generalist at this point. I'm not really a specialist. So they may not have as many classes on their transcript, but they still get counted. And I want to say this, I can't, of course, speak for every college under the sun, but my understanding is Project Lead the Way gets given the same weight as a advanced class in the curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
So whether it's honors or AP or IB, and when a college recalculates GPA, they get the boost. Now, it'd be interesting to know in the state of California if they do that I think they probably do, because the high schools then would have the option of indicating on the transcript that it's an honors level class. So the California kids could count it as a point on their UC GPA. I do not know the answer to that question, though. But I think that fundamentally colleges are thrilled by this because, if I were looking at this young man's transcript with these robust STEM classes and knowing the high level lab and the electricity, the digital electronics class, I know what that's about. But this is a young man who's getting extraordinary hands-on research and problem-solving, critical thinking experience built right into his curriculum, which, from my mind, it doesn't get any better than that. And, I think colleges understand that. Even in an AP curriculum, STEM kids aren't getting that. I'll show a little bit of my frustration with the AP curriculum in that I don't think AP has figured out how to build project-based learning and experiential collaborative work into their curriculum. And all the colleges are. So they're looking for that on the secondary level. They know that physics, electricity, and magnetism is great. No argument there. But to look at a curriculum that includes applied learning, problem solving, collaboration, across engineering, computer science, and biomedical science is pretty impressive. What's interesting too, and I didn't realize this until I looked it up before I knew we were going to talk about this, is high schools who are in the PLTW program can also run coursework in green architecture, flight and aerospace, design and modeling, automation and robotics, application creation. So we think of engineering, computer science, and biomedical science as the three big prongs of Project Lead the Way. But I wasn't even aware that they had some of those other concentrations. I don't know if every high school buys into the whole, 10 different concentrations, or whether they limit it based on what their faculty can manage. But I was really interested in that.
Do you know what year it was launched, Susan? I don't remember this when we were at Westtown. Of course, we weren't seeing outside curriculums other than the students that we worked with there. And I don't see it very often now. Like I'll see one kid every 2 years will have Project Lead the Way courses. So it still feels to me like it's small but growing.
See, Mark, I see it all the time.
Right. But you also you can be reading STEM heavy applications.
Yeah. So, and I see it
like 1 in 10, 1 in 5%.
Yes.
About? Yeah, that's pretty high.
I'd say between 5 and 10. And as I mentioned, they are public schools for the most part. And I wish I knew a little bit more about that, about how now I'm looking at the website here, and interestingly, it says in 2015, College Board partnered with Lead the Way in an effort to encourage STEM majors. Students who have successfully passed at least 3 exams, 1 AP, 1 PLTW, and another AP or PLTW, are eligible to receive a certificate of recognition. I mean, College Board comes up with more recognitions.
Sure. Well, it's probably a smart business move for them. Otherwise,
is.
Co-opt them and try not to have them be a competitor to AP, and try to have them under their umbrella if possible.
Well, I think in a way that's a big issue for College Board. This is competing with AP coursework. I mean, I imagine there are a lot of more modestly resourced public school systems out there that would go for a robust PLTW curriculum and maybe keep the math, the AP in the calculus area.
Now, one thing I don't know anything about is how colleges give credit for them or not give credit, because I know that's, if you're ever going to compete with IAP, you're going to have to come with that, because that's incredibly appealing to parents.
Yeah, I don't think it's a advanced placement.
Yeah.
Except in the classes where the ones where there's that partnership, but that's kind of only math. Maybe don't quote me on that, but
I think that's what it would take for it to take off, because that's just such a big part of the appeal to anybody, is the thought, and especially now with the with the cost of college, is the thought that you could come in with half a year, or even more potentially. That's extremely appealing to students and parents.
See, but I think that would absolutely blow a big hole in Project Lead the Way, because it's experientially, it's both academic and experientially based. And that's what makes it different from AP in general. AP maybe has more of the research focus, and PLTW has more of the hands-on problem solving. Many more kids can engage in Project Lead the Way than they can in AP.
I just see just an enormous financial pressure families are feeling. Only the wealthiest of the wealthy, college cost is a non-issue. And so you just see it. You see schools doing more certificates, and you see 3-year programs and online and dual. That's one of the reasons why dual credit and dual enrollment is growing so fast.
Yeah.
Is because so many schools will give you credit without having to go get a 3, 4, or 5 on the test, and incredibly appealing to family. And I'm not necessarily talking about doing college in 2 years, going all the way to that extreme.
Like with Running Start.
Yeah, I'm just talking about Joy had a half a year of credit when she came in. I had a half a year credit way back in the day. And it gave me tremendous options. Joy ended up doubling. She still wanted to graduate with her class, but it allowed her to double major, and still a couple semesters still only take 12 credit hours, because you're coming in with one semester, done credit wise. I just find that to be very, very appealing to families. And so I think the courses are fantastic, but I think if they were ever to take on AP in any deep way, and maybe they don't even want to, maybe they formed more of a partnership with the College Board and they're working in together. I don't know.
I don't see it as aligning with that goal as much. I think, and plus, when you look at some of the more selective, the band of selective colleges and universities in the country, they're very disinclined to let kids come in at a higher level in their major field. The first year, you can't get out of the first year engineering programs, whether it's at, Georgia Tech, Purdue, even
Sure.
the big guns.
But I'm looking at the fact that that's 3% of the country.
Oh yeah.
That's not the 97%.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm looking at the masses. Yeah, not the elite of the elite in terms of that.
No, I hear you on that. It's with the cost.
But what a creative approach, though, to provide some specialized learning in areas of interest and some experiential component. And it's also a great way for people to maybe figure out if they like something.
Absolutely.
Without having to spend a ton of money on the summer sometimes.
Well, and what I'm finding in selective college admission and in reading applications too, is that it's not enough for kids to have taken the classes to be competitive. They really have to show evidence, evidence that they have found a way to use their time to gain a type of experience that would take them beyond theory into practice. Right. And I think that's what advances engineering applicants a lot. So competing for biomedical engineering, and this is the field that this dad points to for his son, potentially the most selective field of undergraduate engineering, right? Not everybody has it to begin with. And it tends to be the most selective engineering field. Now, if you're admitted to a first year engineering program, you still are saying, I am likely to want to go in this direction. I think that's a little different from the schools where, like at Johns Hopkins, where if you put, I think it's Johns Hopkins, where if you put biomedical engineering as your first choice, is that you can't have a second choice or something. I mean, it's right on the Common App academic question. There's something very pointed about it. So at the university where, if I'm reading engineering at my university, and a student has biomedical engineering as their first choice, they better have a less selective second choice, because there's something ridiculous like 17 slots in the first year class for biomedical engineering.
The other one that's right up there with it is aerospace.
Oh, absolutely.
Aerospace is super, super competitive.
Absolutely. So if those applicants in fields of study like that can show that they've done up close and personal work in the subject area, right, they are so much better qualified and more likely to be seen as, okay, that's the kind of kid we want, because they know what this is all about. So that's why I'm so excited for this young man mentioned in this question, because he's going to have a really solid application for biomed engineering.
Yeah, and I got the sense, and I think it was explicitly said right in the question, that he's done well in school too.
Yes.
He sounds like he's been quite successful.
Yeah, you got to have it all, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sending this question in.
Great question.
Yep. Awesome.
I'm happy to toot Project Lead the Way's horn.
I knew you would love this, Susan. I worked with you long enough to know how you think on most things. Not all, but most.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Friends, in part 1 of Lisa's interview with Michelle McAnaney, Michelle gives her background. Lisa introduces a topic, what to do to maximize your time on the college tour. Michelle gives some tips for what to look for at information sessions. Michelle shares some tips to get the most out of the college tour. Michelle talks about what she does on a tour when students start sounding very scripted and repetitive. Listen and enjoy.
Hi, this is Lisa, one of the co-hosts on Your College Bound Kid, and I am very excited today to be talking to Michelle McAnaney, who is also known as the College Spy, on how to structure and get the most out of your college visits. Michelle is an expert in college admissions and a leader in her field. She has over 20 years of experience as an educator, counselor, and consultant, and she assists students in making smart choices to reach their full potential. Welcome to the podcast, Michelle.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So I always like to ask people just how they became in the position that they are now in. So how did you become the College Spy?
My background is high school guidance. I used to be a school counselor. I've worked in Maine and New York, and I actually worked with little kids in England for a little while, which was not for me. I'm definitely good at the teenagers. And in 2014, my husband got a virtual position, and we kind of looked at each other like, we don't need to leave to live anywhere. We could move around. And I left my job as a school counselor and started to expertise myself in the field of college admissions by taking the University of California Irvine courses, attending conferences and webinars and reading. And I started the College Spy so that I could do something that was very unique at the time, which was I was going to work on Zoom with all my students. It was going to be a virtual practice and convenient for everybody. And parents were asking, well, how are you going to do an essay with them? And they stopped asking those questions during COVID. And the College Spy took off from there.
That's great. Well, I know today we're going to be talking about some of your tips and tricks for students and families when they visit colleges. And one thing that in our pre-conversation I thought was really important is you mentioned that students and families should really try to think about before they go on the tour, what is the purpose of this tour? So can you tell us more about how they should do that and what kinds of things they should think about?
Sure. So there's different purposes to taking a tour depending on where you are in the admissions process. So for some students, the purpose is to familiarize themselves with their own criteria for their college search. So perhaps you're touring a large college to get a sense of what is that like, and then touring a small college to get a sense of what that is like and see what's your preference. Or maybe you're taking a tour in a city and then you're going to a suburban area and then an urban area. And I always tell families, you don't need to travel to do this. You don't have to look at schools that are definitely going to be on your list or are contenders for being on your list. You could do this in your own backyard just to get a sense of what is it that I really want on in my college experience. And it kind of helps you narrow down or sometimes expand where you should look that might be further away. So that's the first purpose. The second one is to decide where it is that you want to actually apply. So you might be visiting a campus to say, do I want this school or do I not want this school on my list? And then finally, to make your final college decision, visiting colleges you've been accepted to understand what they're all about and which is your final choice.
Yeah, because I think, knowing that going in can really inform the type of information that you're going to be collecting on that tour. So the information session, like I know you and I have been to a bunch of information sessions, and at some point they all start to run together, I feel like. So I'm sure families have the same experience. How can families like kind of weed through that and get the most out of their information sessions?
The information session is actually the part I like the best if the college does it well.
Right.
Initially, students are, when students first start touring, they are learning things they might not have known before. So they're hearing about internship opportunities or any experiential learning opportunities, studying abroad, or how the gen ed requirements work at this particular college. But they're also learning about the admissions process. A lot of information sessions talk to students about filling out their applications and writing their essays and what the school is actually looking for. And it can be really helpful. But you're right, over time, they do start to sound a little bit alike. So depending on where the student is on their college search journey, so if they're out the beginning and they're just there and absorbing it, they're going to get a lot out of it. So what I tell students to do is to listen for things that are a little bit different from one another as they start touring more and more colleges, and to take note of what makes this college stand out. I do like when the admissions counselor will talk about why a student might want to attend a school like theirs or in the area where theirs is located, because sometimes students don't think about those kinds of things, that the area that the school is located in can be useful or less useful to them depending on what they're looking for. I also advise students to listen for keywords that might illuminate campus culture or might illuminate what they're looking for in their applicants. So maybe they're looking for the well-rounded kid, or the kid that's super passionate, or one that really takes the initiative. So it's an interesting experience as you go over and over again to these info sessions to try to pick out what is unique about this college.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that's such a great point, is that I kind of wish colleges would be a little bit more explicit about that at times. It's just sort of like this general sales. Our dorms are great, and we have financial aid. We have a holistic admissions process. But to really just kind of talk about what makes them different. And so sometimes you really do have to listen to it. It's kind of like implied in a lot of the things that they're saying.
Yeah, sometimes I'll send students in with 2 questions to ask. And we pick those questions together based on our own conversations. What do you really want to know when you walk out of this information session, or even out of the entire campus visit experience? Let's come up with a list of questions of things that you want to know so that you can start comparing one campus to another. And it's similar to when you're on a field trip as a little kid and you're given a scavenger hunt, right? Because the teacher wants to make sure that you're paying attention and not just hanging out with your friends and having a good time, but you're actually looking for something. So it's deciding in advance, what do I want to get out of this? And therefore, at the info session, if they're not giving you the answers to your questions, you can raise your hand and ask. And for some kids, it's so easy. And for other kids, they are never going to do that. And they don't even want their parents to ask the question. But I think it's our job as independent educational consultants to help guide them towards, this is the best practice. You've made the investment to get to campus. You've spent your time to go. Sometimes there's money involved to get there. You've given up something else. You want to get out of it a certain information that's going to help you make a decision about what you like about colleges in general, or what you like about this college or don't like. So ask your questions. This is your chance.
Yeah, no, I think that's such a growth experience, I'll say, for students and me, right? You won't see me raising my hand at the info session either a lot of the times, but I think that's really good. And I think that just like it helps the admissions officers too think like, what have I not said? What could I be saying?
Yes.
To be more
Yes.
descriptive.
Yep. And some of them are so on script, right? They're so on
Yeah.
script. And it's like, it's almost a sing-song sound to how they're presenting, which is cringy. Like, I don't like that. But others are a little bit more able to read their audience and make adjustments accordingly. I think it depends on their skill as a presenter. And what I always tell families is don't let the presenter's skill affect how much you like this college, whether it's positive or negative, right? If they do a great sales pitch and you really feel connected with the person presenting to you, whether it's the admissions counselor or the tour guide, that can influence you positively towards a school that might not be a good fit. So you want to think about what is affecting my feelings about this college.
Right. Yeah. And try to be objective and take the staff out of it. Yeah. I know, my daughter goes to Elon, and when she and I visited several years ago, the vice president of admissions came and did our information session, and he was awesome, right? I mean, he's super experienced. He's super knowledgeable in the process. He straight up told us, if you want to go here, you need to do this, 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 and this. And it just was really great. But, he still kind of followed the script. And then I went a couple years later with Mark to go to another tour again. And it was like a younger AO. And like, it was a completely different experience, and it was not engaging at all. So I think that's really important to keep in mind that, it's the same school, it's the same information, they have the same process. It's just, I didn't see the kids being as engaged as they were in the first tour. So,
yeah.
Let's take a break to learn about Mark's recommended resource for the week.
Friends, many of you wrote in to say that you enjoyed the discussion Susan and I had on, is enrollment management to blame for many of the problems colleges face? It was a two-parter that we did the last few weeks. And to be honest, I was a little troubled after that discussion that I didn't quite get the right nuance. I came very close to recording an insert that was going to say something like this. Part of what troubles me about the direction enrollment management has gone is you take nonprofits with philanthropic and altruistic missions, but it feels like they're selling their soul out to corporate America in the way of the big firms that are just concerned about making money. And the example I was going to use was, how would we feel if a church was struggling for attendance, and then a pastor found out that this casino was growing like weeds, and so the pastor reached out to the casino for advice on how to grow the church. There's just something a little unsettling about that. Well, anyway, Stephen Bird heard our discussion, and he reached out to me this week. We had multiple pleasant exchanges. He appreciated the attention we brought to the topic, which is really important, and he thought we did a pretty good job of summarizing the article. But he said, had we discussed the book, there would have been so much more nuance we could have brought in. And I hate missing nuance. So Stephen has agreed to come on the podcast with Don Hostler, a former enrollment manager himself who studied the subject his whole life. In fact, I'll be interviewing them in 19 days. But in order to prepare for that, I'm going to read the whole book. They're sending me a copy. I can't wait to read it. But in order to prepare for it, you can check out the article we probably should have discussed, and it's called The Dark Art of Enrollment Management. It's in the Chronicle. Stephen wrote it. The subtitle is, Funds that once went to students in need are now going to climb the rankings. And I'd highly recommend you check it out. It will prepare you well for that discussion, and it's a recommended resource for episode 437. We now return to Lisa's interview with Michelle.
All right. So you've survived the information session. What tips and tricks do you have for families to get the most out of the actual college tour?
Sure. So my first tip is to not necessarily go with the tour guide you're assigned to. So if you've never been on a college tour, what happens is at the end of the information session, this almost always happens, the tour guides come in and they introduce themselves to the group. And then you're told, oh, this row is going to go with this person or whatever system they have for assigning you. And if there's only a handful of people in the information session, you really can't choose your tour guide so easily because you don't want to hurt anybody's feelings or have that tour guide have nobody if there's like only two or three people assigned to them. But oftentimes there are a lot of people sitting there and you really can choose your tour guide that you feel is going to do the best job. And I recommend that you do because nobody's going to notice and you made the effort to get there. So you want to have a good experience. So sometimes it could be that you could choose a tour guide that you have something in common with. Perhaps they've introduced themselves and said that they are studying a specific major that you're also interested in. Or maybe it's because that kid is from your hometown or near where you're from. And so you'll have a chance to connect with them as you're walking along. And oftentimes there are times where you can walk with the tour guide and chat with them not privately, but one-on-one where they're not presenting to the whole group. So your child might be more likely to engage if that person's from your hometown, or maybe they're involved in a club or an activity that you're interested in also. So I would recommend picking that person. And sometimes it's just a matter of picking, well, that person seems like they'll be funny or they are engaging in a way that fits for you. So I highly recommend choosing your tour guide if you can get away with it socially.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a matter of like sneaking off, just like when they all like
Yep,
take their bathroom break before they go out is just kind of, just realigning yourself.
exactly. Another tip that I have is I alluded to just before is to walk in the front with the tour guide so that you have a chance as the tour guides don't walk backwards anymore like they did when Gen X went to, I think they're not allowed.
No,
One or
it's too
two fell
dangerous.
over. I guess it's too
Yeah.
dangerous. So they go from place to place and they walk forward. And so you can walk with them. And that's a good chance to ask your questions if you don't want to ask it in front of the whole group to just the tour guide. But the other thing that you can do if you don't have a question or you're just not the type to ask a lot of questions is eavesdrop on other parents and students' questions. So at that time, you're hearing the tour guide off script. They're just being a student. They're just being themselves, usually. And you can get a lot of information that way about the college and that tour guide's experience.
Yeah, that's a great tip. Although, some kids, like my daughter, my oldest, like she wanted me to be in the back, like far away from, basically like hardly on the tour at all because I guess I'm embarrassing. I don't know. But if you can get kids again to kind of get past that and really try to get the most out of the tours, it's going to be such a different experience.
Yeah, or just don't walk with your kid. You can walk in the back and they can walk up front and ask the tour guide a
Yeah.
question or do that eavesdropping. And I think for sometimes it's interesting. Parents will listen to their kids. If the kid is like, don't ever ask a question, you're going to embarrass me. Oftentimes parents don't, but it might make sense to have a conversation around on your way there around, we're here to learn about this school. How do we want to gather information? Do we just want to take whatever they give us, whether it's relevant to our situation or not, or whether they're doing a great job with the tour or not? Or do you want me to ask these certain questions? Do you want to ask the questions? And for some families, it might be more comfortable and more effective to grab the card of your tour guide, often has a
Hmm.
card, or of the admissions counselor or your regional representative, who the admissions rep that reads for your area of the country. They read your application and follow up with questions and say, I was on tour and I have the following questions. And then you're connecting with that person and getting one-on-one answers. And the added benefit is you're demonstrating your interest as a college, which colleges really like.
Right. Yeah. And that's a really good point. Yeah. I think like trying to reframe it as like you guys are spies. You're trying to get the real skinny on the college. You're not just going to take what they give you. Like that's a different mindset. And how are we going to fan out and collect all the information that we need? I think like it's a way to make it more fun, but it's also like then you're working as a team. You're not kind of just being this embarrassing appendage to your
Yeah.
child.
Right. It's funny that I've never thought of that to say to the kids, you're the spy, because I'm always like, I'm the college spy. No, they're the spies. You're going to hear me all over social media talking about how everybody else needs to become a spy from here on out.
All right. Yeah. We all are
All right, thank
spies,
you.
right? You know?
Right.
It's just more fun. I mean, when I think eavesdropping, that's like, ooh, what's going on over there?
Right. Right. The other thing that I'm doing, because I've taken so many college tours, it's around 300 schools now, is it does get a little repetitive sometimes. Like, I'm listening for, how is this school different from another school? So when they start talking about the dining hall swipes, I don't need to know what swipes are in the dining hall and how that works in order to recommend a school to a family, unless I have a student who maybe has some type of dietary need, right? Or an eating disorder or something like that. Or they'll talk about the blue light safety system when every kid has a phone in their pocket. Over and over again, I'm hearing that. So what I'm doing is I'm listening, but I'm also looking around campus for clues of what the culture on campus is. I want to know what is this college really like? If I send a student here or recommend a student look at it, is this a pre-professional environment where all the students are really focused on what am I going to be doing next after college? Or is it all about your intellectual curiosity and learning while you're here, anything you can, relevant or not to your future, because you're just learning is the thing you need to be able to do in order to have a great job? Or is this a place where sometimes I'm looking for the vibe? Like, is it very preppy? Is it artsy? Is there a lot of activism? So I'm looking for those clues often, and parents and students should be too, because often they walk away from these tours going, that's not that different from another school. They're not sure how it's different. So you need to be looking around you at different signs on campus and all kinds of different things that might share with you, like, oh, this school is different in this way, and nobody mentioned it. I saw it.
Friends, this concludes the first part of Lisa's interview with Michelle McAnaney. Hope you'll come back next week for the final part.
And now it's time for our College Spotlight of the Week.
Friends, if you missed Kevin Newton's part 1 and part 2 on London School of Economics, I told Kevin and our whole team this week that this was my favorite college spotlight that I've done with Kevin. So I highly encourage you to go back and listen to part 1 and part 2. But we'll now transition to the final part. Kevin Newton breaking down the London School of Economics. Talk to me about the campus. So one thing that people sometimes can feel very strongly about is, you'll see different words for it, like some people call it a protected campus. Some people call it a self-contained campus. Some people call it just a campus feel, but it's the idea that the campus feels kind of walled off from the surrounding area, as opposed to a place like Georgia State here in Atlanta, where there literally is no boundary, and they brag about Atlanta is our campus, and there's no, separation whatsoever. NYU, GW, BU, schools like that.
Honestly, it reminds me of GW.
Mm-hmm.
There are some, alleyways and alcoves that you definitely feel that you're away from London, but LSE's campus is in Holborn. It's not downtown. It's not in the city, the ceremonial square mile, but it's, last time I was there, I don't know if this is still the case, the one redeeming feature about it was that they had a Krispy Kreme donuts. And
Kevin likes his donuts. I know you. I know you were smiling on that one.
I'm just going to throw this out there. If anyone ends up going to college or university in London or grad school in London, knowing where the Krispy Kreme donuts were and having just a standing order on Amazon.com, not Amazon.co.uk, but Amazon.com, to get boxes of Kraft macaroni and cheese delivered will help your social life immensely.
Why?
Mark, don't make me answer that question.
Okay. I won't.
I'm a happily married man. I'm not going to go back into the Stone Age now.
Okay. We'll leave that one alone. So, one thing I've never asked you, Kevin, is application timeline for for an LSE? And if it's similar, you cast all the other schools, you maybe can say that as well. Like, when do applications need to be in? When do people hear decisions? What's that look like?
So the official deadline tends to be towards the end of January. The last couple of years it's been January 31st, but it does move around a little bit. Oxford and Cambridge, of course, have their deadline on October 15th. I would highly recommend applying to LSE by October 15th. There's no real advantage, but what you're doing by doing that. And again, this could be completely inside my head. This could be that I've just been in the game too long that I'm starting to see it's like the cutscenes from the Matrix, where I'm just starting to see everything, whether it's real or not. It shows that you're serious. It shows that you know what you want to do. And it also puts that little seed of doubt in LSE's mind that they're also applying to Oxford or Cambridge. So they know what they're doing. They're American. They've already got these, great AP scores. They've got a competitive GPA. Their personal statement questions are awesome. We need to make sure when we start application review, they're at the top of the pile.
So does that mean implicitly, you think in subtle ways, even that the schools might say demonstrated interest is a non-factor, it kind of can filter in?
I don't know if it's so much a demonstrated interest thing, because again, they're not going to care. Like, obviously,
that's basically what you described.
It is basically what I just described, but it's not quite to the level of tracking if you've opened emails or anything like that. It's just to,
and that's one way like that, that
Yeah.
there's once again, just like holistic admissions is on a continuum, demonstrated interest is on a continuum too.
It's just that little bit. That said, you can absolutely still get in if you apply January 31st. There's no doubt about that. But just in my limited experience in this, just because I've been doing this for years, but again, there are only so many kids who are applying to LSE every year, because some people look at all of this and they get really excited. Some people look at all this and they get terrified. And both are equally valid, because fit matters. But it is something worth kind of noting, is that if you go ahead, you get things in, you get things going, it does tend to just cause a little bit of a increase in the quality of the outcome.
And you're notified when of the decision?
Typically, you learn in mid-March.
So in a lot of ways, it's very similar to our regular decision process. I mean, we tend to have earlier than late January deadlines. It does depend on the school. And the more selective schools do their notification in March for regular decision. And is there just one method? There's not like, well, there's the early option and the regular option. Is it literally just one timeline and everybody's on it?
Just one timeline and everyone's on it.
What kind of acceptance rate are we talking?
It's a great question. So it actually surprises a lot of people that LSE's acceptance rate is lower than Oxford's and Cambridge's. And a lot of the reason for that is that you're capped at, you can apply to one course at either Oxford or Cambridge. You can put all 5 of your UCAS applications in at LSE. I would never recommend doing that, but it is something you could do.
You mean you would just target different programs?
Right. So the acceptance rate is actually closer to around 10%, which, and again, dependent on the course of study. If you're going in to study human geography, you're going to have a higher acceptance rate than going in to study economics or finance.
Right.
But typically around 10%.
And do they break the data out between international acceptance and overall acceptance?
I've never seen it for LSE, but I've honestly, Mark, full confession, I've never went digging for it. I've went digging for it for Oxford and Cambridge and, God knows how many others, but LSE, it's just.
What I'm not holding you to this, but and intuitively, would you think it would be similar, or would you think it would be harder for an international versus a domestic?
I think it would be quite similar, if not a little easier. But the thing is, you want to make sure you're checking all the boxes that they're looking for. So I had a student a few years ago who applied, and his personal statement veered just a tiny bit over away from what they wanted him to discuss. And in retrospect, it made sense. At the time, it's a 50-50. And, I asked him which version he felt more comfortable with. He said the one that veered, and they said, you veered off.
So they actually gave you him feedback?
They give very general feedback. They say essentially, your personal statement was your limiting factor, which doesn't tell you anything else.
We don't get that over here, so that's still probably helpful, and helpful for you as a counselor to get feedback as to why sometimes somebody doesn't get in. Would they say things like your test scores were soft?
They would just say your academics didn't meet the criteria in that case.
Yeah.
And it's also the traditional, like things like, well, we had a lot of really competitive applicants, and unfortunately,
There's some of that sort of PC general language. Yeah. Yeah. This is really awesome. Is there anything about LSE in closing you haven't shared that you'd want our listeners to know?
I think that if you're the kind of person who wakes up every morning and reads the FT or the Wall Street Journal and watches Bloomberg all day, LSE's for you. If you're not, think about it, because it may be the best option for you, especially if you're interested in something like political philosophy. It may not be. But again, markets, like we've talked about, numerous times, and we both believe to our core, fit and match matters.
Sure.
And LSE is a great example of that.
I did think of a couple other cookies. What kind of academic intensity is there? Like, is this, hey, this place is not for the faint of heart? Like, is it, how would you describe workload, rigor, and the experience of kids kind of when they get there? And even just, are there supports?
It's very much a work hard, play hard environment.
Mm-hmm. Are there supports for kids who are struggling or who need help? Or is it kind of like, hey, figure it out, you're on your own? Yeah,
absolutely. The whole British university system has a lot available for students who, who want to be proactive and make sure that, if they need a little extra help, then they've got it. So, and the support for things like ADHD and dyslexia is just through the roof.
Does it feel very international as a composition of the student body?
Yes. You're going to be going to school or university with people who are very multilingual, who've lived on multiple continents, who I remember one guy, because like I said, my friend who was doing his master's degree while I was doing my master's degree, was our party trick to see if we could trip each other up, switching between the 3 or 4 languages we had in common. And he would always go to Russian, and he'd beat me every time.
Kevin, this has been amazing. Our listeners may not know this, but you've launched your own international podcast. I'll take a little credit for challenging you to do this.
I appreciate it, Mark.
I'm really glad you've done this. Why don't you tell our listeners the name and the frequency and anything you want to say about it?
Right. It's very aptly named An Education Abroad, and we post new episodes every Wednesday morning. So, in fact, when I get off the podcast with you, I get to go edit our new one. So
awesome. And sometimes I know you're interviewing some people there. You've done some interviews both with, why don't you talk about your format?
Right. So typically we switch back and forth on a weekly basis between episodes highlighting universities outside the U.S. and those, topics that are of more interest. So, Mark, you were kind enough to be on not so long ago to talk about the importance of fit and match. And Julia actually was our very first guest, because she interviewed me so that it wasn't just me talking. And Vince has been on to talk about LGBTQ admissions or issues overseas. So it's really just a lot of fun catching up with some friends. So, but thank you again for mentioning it.
No. And thank you so much for coming on. And, you and I will have to talk offline about what else we need to cover and take a look at all the things we've covered. And we appreciate you coming on at least once a quarter. And my listeners love, learning about options either for their kids or, we just have the kind of listeners who are just curious people. So even if they're not thinking this is good for their own kids, they want to know when they bump into someone that's got a kid going there, or a person themselves that's gone to these places, they can have a little knowledge to have an intelligible conversation. So you're a big part of what we're doing, and we appreciate you every time you come on, Kev. Thanks a lot for doing, especially this deep dive that's been over the last 3 weeks.
Well, my pleasure, Mark. I appreciate
Awesome.
it.
Keep in touch, my friend. Friends, on Monday's episode, I'm going to continue a series I started last Monday looking at missed opportunities. These are things that students and or parents miss that could help prepare them better for college. And I promise you this time we will take on what was question 168, so it was asked a while ago, on scholarship displacement. And we'll have the final part, my friend John Hoffman sharing lessons learned in his 45-year career. And friends, I close you out with a quote from the director of admission at UCLA, Gary Clark, someone who we've had on the podcast before. And he said something that I think we all should think about. So here's what Gary said. Everything you do isn't about how it looks on a college application. High school is all about getting into the right college. Your undergraduate program is all about getting the right MBA or JD or med school. And then you wind up in adulthood working, or you have a family, and you look back on your life and you're like, I didn't really have fun. I didn't really get to be a kid. Gary Clark, Director of Undergraduate Admissions, UCLA. See you on Monday, friends. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us and you'll get every single episode as soon as it is released. If you're interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. I'm the producer of the podcast, but we have a fantastic team of 15. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. Lisa Ruff, Dr. David Williams, Linda Depker, Susan Tree, Vince Garcia, and Julia Esquivel. And to our substitute co-host, Sylvia Borgo. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Blass. Lily Parikh manages our Instagram. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Joyce Ducker does our website episode updates. And our webmaster is Stalianos Dimitriou. And if you want to have a coaching session with Lisa, Linda, or me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want us to answer, or if you have a recommended resource or article you think we should discuss, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Our favorite method is for you to record your own voice at speakpipe.com/YCBK. By the way, check out our website, where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. If you want to learn about other hot admissions topics, follow us on Twitter at YCBK Podcast. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you every single Monday and Thursday.